Hi, I'm Meta Spencer. Hey, let's go to Africa, shall we? I haven't been, in fact, I've never been to Africa, not even once. But let's go to Senegal, which I have a good impression on that of all the countries in Africa that might be fun to visit, Senegal is one of them. And I have some friends here who really know Senegal. Let me start with Martin Klein because I've known him the longest. I think. No, maybe not. I mean, Subha's been in my life a long time, but Martin Klein is a professor emeritus of history, University of Toronto, and he is a specialist in the history of Africa. He has been emeritus a long time, retired, and just published or is publishing an encyclopedia of African history, which he edited, and it's got thousands of pages, of which 4 articles were written by him. So we'll find out a little bit about Senegal because he used to go there every year and start his journeys through other parts of Africa there. Subha Xavier, I met when she was, what, 5 years old? Something like that. And that Subha came as a refugee from Sri Lanka back in the 80s. Subha grew up in Montreal and learning French and became a professor of French at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, where she actually leads groups of students, I believe, to Africa to study Africa and especially Senegal. So every year she takes a bunch of students and has been going for several summers, taking her family. I think her 2 sons are both learning some African language. And Marty were both talking about the importance of not talking about African politics without an African intellectual present. And I understand that Hady Ba is an academic who knows a lot about a particular, especially about a particular uh, conflict going on among leaders of Senegal now. So I'm going to ask, because we're only getting acquainted personally, only barely, I'd like for Suba to introduce her friend and colleague, Hady Ba.
Okay, thank you so much, Meta. Yes, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Hady Ba into this conversation. Hady is a political philosopher. He is a professor at the Université Cheikh Anta Diop. He has had and serves as visiting professor in many universities in the US. And he is also very recently the winner of the France Fanon Prize for Philosophy and Caribbean Studies. He is also very active in the political circuits, and I've been very impressed by much of his writing and thoughtful contributions to political analysis through a philosophical and theoretical point of view as well. He, I believe, is also director of the FESTEC at the l'UQAD and is an incredibly published writer and author, training students as well in K through 12 education at the Université Charente Diop. Hady, I know that is a very limited and short introduction to a rather complex and a varied career. So if you want to add a few more things about your own profile, that would be wonderful too.
I have nothing to add. You've been very generous with your introduction. So, no, let's just have a conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Well, that was Marty Klein is almost my age, well, and I'm going to be 95 in a few days. I don't know what Marty. How old are you?
92.
92. Well, we're in the same age bracket,
Mhm.
And
and
I first went to Senegal in 1963.
I wasn't
so
yet
that's
born.
why I'm going to ask you to kick things off because I think we ought to talk about the past before we start talking about the current conflicts. and maybe the future of Senegal. So, why don't you start us off, Marty, by recollecting some of the adventures that you had back in the '60s in Africa?
Uh, they weren't, people talk about them as adventures, but Senegal's not a place where there's adventures. But I lucked into some wonderful relationships. I arrived before my wife had to finish her. We got married just before I left, and and I and uh, and so I went to Senegal alone, and I ate my lunches every day at the student restaurant. And if I had a student who I was writing my thesis on an area called Sine Saloum. And if I met somebody from Sine Saloum, I would say, "Oh, that's interesting. I'm writing my thesis on Sine Saloum." And this would often produce an invitation. Uh, and and one of these invitations, I was invited. I was going down there with a guy um, who was probably a bit of a con man, because we never got to his village. And we passed a town called Fatigue, and he said, "Do you want to meet Hardiouf?" And at the time, I had no idea who Hardiouf was. And I said, "Sure." And it turned out Hardiouf was mayor of Fatigue. He was a deputy. He was a minister. And he was also grandson of the local ruler, the Boursin. And and he also liked having, and this was true of a lot of some Senegalese still at this period, which was only a few years after independence. He liked having two white people in his entourage, quite frankly, uh, because we went into his office, and he immediately said, "Well, you'll stay. Will you stay for lunch?" And it turned out that he didn't have a residence in Fatigue, that he used to eat his meals at the home of the local Lebanese merchant, uh, which was my introduction to some of the Senegalese local political relationships at the time. Uh, and the lunch was an education for me as a newcomer to Senegal. Uh, I also met a young man who uh, when I told him what I was interested in, he said, "Oh, my uncle is a griot." I didn't realize at the time that meant that he was a griot, because griots are hereditary. Uh, but he invited me to in, into to to he invited me to to interview his uncle, and to stay at in his father's compound, where there was a house that was available. And his father said, we did come down the next week, and his father said, uh, "You're welcome to stay here anytime you're doing research in Sine Saloum." And we probably spent about 1 week out of every month in the home of the Ngum family. And they were our much of my understand that both the meals with students and the trips with students, and the time we spent with the Ngum family. Albury Ngum had four wives, one of whom had no children, but 17 surviving children. And we developed a feeling and understanding for Senegalese life, Senegalese values. The sons of Albury and Gum were passionately involved in the politics of the time. This is
Now,
the
you got me curious, Marty. Are most Senegalese Muslim, or are
Yes.
native?
No, no,
uh,
no. Senegal is about I don't know, Hadi. I'd say probably about 90% Muslim, maybe more. No, some of the
95% Muslim, more than 95% Muslim, yeah.
yeah, and there is part of Sin Saloum, the kingdom of Sin, was originally pagan. It was resisted Islam for a long time, but the time we were there, it was becoming Muslim, and I think Sin is probably mostly Muslim today. Would you agree, Hadi?
Yes, now it's completely Muslim.
Completely
They
Muslim?
still practice the traditional religions,
Yeah.
but they are mostly Muslim. But also, what characterizes Sin is the fact that the Serer would have families where you can have brothers who are Muslim, and or one would be Muslim, another would be Christian, without any problem. So the Serer are a very tolerant, accepting ethnicity, even in Senegal.
Well, Senegal is very tolerant in general,
Yeah, in
but
general.
there is a Catholic. Is there a cardinal or an archbishop? And Senegal, Islam in Senegal is organized largely in Sufi orders called tariqa, and these and the so that the major leaders of these Sufi orders are very powerful people, politically, religiously. And one of them was somebody I did get to meet and spend time with, and this is a man named Ibrahim Niasse, who was quite an important international figure. He had a lot of followers in Nigeria, and 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 he was and in fact the way I got to meet him was demonstrated to me the fact that there was tolerance, that the members of the different religious orders would visit each other. They would attend each other's festivals, and because Al-Buri was a member of a group called the Tijaniya, uh, of, of followers of a man called Malik C. Uh, but he was also accepted at the house of Ibrahim Niasse. And one day he said to me, "Do you want to meet Ibrahim Niasse?" And I said, "Sure, I'd love." By this time, I knew something about Senegal, and I knew that Niasse was a very important figure, uh, and uh, and uh, and we were accepted at Niasse's place. Every time we came to visit after the first visit, a Gambian Taliban, a Gambian disciple, would quickly materialize. It was a very efficient operation. He would quickly materialize just to make sure that that I I would understand everything. Though
Now, let me interrupt because I'm curious about whether or not the experience you had in those earlier years would be replicated today. I mean, you spoke of meeting somebody with 17 wives. How common would that be
and
today? Is
he didn't have
polygamy
17 wives. He had 17 children.
17 children? I'm sorry,
He had
not
full
wives,
wives.
but still, that's a family and a half. For us. Is polygamy still normative today? Is that something as strong as it was in those days? And in a way, it would be interesting to compare your initiation uh, to Senegalese society to Suba's as another foreigner arriving. What year? 4 or 5 years ago for the first time.
Well,
Wasn't
More than that at this point, but I mean, it's been, I would say, probably about a decade and a little more that I've been visiting and going to Senegal and working with colleagues at the university. I mean, I think there's probably a lot to say about polygamy. We're always very interested in that in the West. It's always often the topic that we all kind of glob onto. I think that, not just in Senegal, but in much of West Africa and on the continent, polygamy has had different waves, so to speak, and it's been part of the culture in different ways. I certainly encounter it to some extent in current configurations, but in my personal experience, less and less, although I hear I'm also in contact with a different generation, and that generation, an older generation, has more stories to share about polygamous families. I would say, and Hadi, please correct me, but I would say in my generation, I see it less and less. It doesn't seem to be as prevalent. I think it also is an economic arrangement, where certain families, in order to survive, will be, having, multiple a man can have multiple wives that he's then responsible for economically. So that kind of, configuration of family life no longer is as needed in the current economic, configuration of the country. So I don't see it quite as much, but I certainly hear about it, and there is a
What,
certain generation where I think it was much more, prevalent.
what do you
I,
mean by needed?
I think,
Some functional explanation for polygamy that there's some particular value in certain circumstances or not?
well, in the cities, large families are not an advantage. And in fact, many of the younger people, by younger people, I'm talking about people now in their 70s and 80s. There were people, friends of mine, who believed in monogamy. The oldest son of Al Bori, my host, was deliberately, uh, but that meant that when he ran into trouble with his first wife, he got divorced instead of just taking a second wife. Uh, and and uh, and most of his brothers only had one wife. And one of them had two wives and a lot of kids. And in the city, that involved a problem. And the problem is solved by the fact that people raise, I don't know how you would describe it. Hadi might describe it. A lot of my friends had adoptive children, uh, that there were child rearing arrangements. One of my the son that had two wives had 10 kids, and raising 10 kids in the city meant living in crowded conditions. He had a good job with the bus company, uh, but it was difficult feeding them, finding space for them, and five of the kids were being raised by a relative. And but I think increasingly that's very rare. Hadi might want to comment on that.
Yes.
So let's turn to Hadi, but I think also we need to bring us up to date with issues that are current in Senegal now. And in setting this up, I had a little conversation in which I was given to understand that two of the main political leaders in Senegal now are at odds and having a conflict with each other. Hadi, can you talk a little bit about the politics, the current politics of your country, which I think you actually specialize in, or at least know a lot about? Give us an overview of what has gone on lately that you are interested in, and the issue that divides the leaders of your country.
I think that to understand what's happening now, you need to know what happened just before they arrived to power, because the former president of Senegal, Macky Sall, at the end of his term, a lot of Senegalese thought that he wanted a third term, even though the constitution didn't permit him to have a third term. So you had this all these debates about whether the president of Senegal can have a third term or not, and whether Macky Sall wants a third term or not. And Macky Sall always said that he had the right to have a third term, but he never said that whether he would run for a third term or not. So he maintained some sort of ambiguity. And then we had an opponent who were really prominent, Ousmane Sonko, who was the main opponent. Everyone thought that he was the only one who could approach Macky Sall. He was fairly radical as an opponent. He was he says that he's a sovereignist, and that Senegal needs a revolution. So we have this movement with a lot of young people considering that the main problem of Senegal is corruption. There is a lot of corruption in the country, and if we solve this corruption, and if we stop letting France meddle into our politics and our economies, Senegal would be, fine. But in 2021, Sonko got accused of rape. And rather than responding to justice, he said that these accusations of rape were false. That he first said that he'd never been there, then he said that, okay, I've been there, but I didn't rape her. And anyway, these accusations are just to stop me from being president. So we need to demonstrate, and to, even if you need, and he called on the young, telling them, if you need to die, you will die, or otherwise Senegal would become a dictatorship. So we had.
Let me get clear. This guy whose name starts with an S that you just mentioned is the particular person who's challenging the president. And the president says he can have a third term. This is a guy who says, no, you can't, and I should be the new president. And then he gets accused of rape. Is that it?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, his name is Sonko. Sonko. That's his last name, Sonko.
Yeah.
So sorry,
okay.
just
So we had this situation where you have a very popular politician accused of rape, and who said that these accusations are not true, and I won't respond to justice, and these accusations need to go, and blah. And if we need to die, we will die. If he asked the young to die for that. So we had 3 years of 3 years of demonstration, problems, etc. And he got by the end he got condemned, and he was in jail. At some point they made a deal. Macky Sall and this guy, they made a deal. So he got freed. Given that we had elections and he couldn't be a candidate, he asked one of his associates to be candidate for the presidency of Senegal, and this candidate got elected. So we have now a president, Bassirou Diomaye Sonko, who's been designed by the guy who everyone thought would be president. So when Diomaye became president, he designed Sonko as his prime minister. But Senegal is a strong presidential regime. The president of Senegal has a lot of power, let's say. So Sonko became a president, the prime minister of Senegal. For 2 years, he's been prime minister of Senegal, and he's been impatient, let's say, and he's been, let's say, abusive towards the president. So at some point, the president fired him. And now, given that when the president fired him, he went to the National Assembly and he became president of the National Assembly. So we've had 2 years of Sonko being an all-powerful prime minister and controlling the majority party. And when he got fired, he went to the National Assembly. He became president of the National Assembly. And now from the National Assembly, he's trying to either, you can say, destabilize the president, or you can say control the actions of the president, depending on the side you are in. So there has been a lot of activism, parliamentary activism, since he's been president of the National Assembly. But given that Senegal is a strong presidential regime, when the president doesn't want some law voted, there are technicalities for the government to stop the voting of these laws. So we have this situation where there are a lot of problems, and in 2 years, in December, I think the president will be able to dissolve the National Assembly, but before that he can't. So until December, he can't dissolve the National Assembly. So there are laws. There are, for example, the budget is voted by the National Assembly. There are some policies that need to be validated by the National Assembly, and also the president has created his party, and he's let's say persuading people from Sonko's party, which is also his former party, to join him in his party. So we have this situation of crisis in Senegal. And also for 2 years, when Sonko was prime minister, he was a very conflictual prime minister. And the rhetoric was that this is not only a change of government, this is a revolution. So we need to have exceptional measure in order to have a successful revolution. And he attacked Senegalese allies like France. He would attack the IMF. So we still do not have a program with the IMF, and Senegal needs a program with the IMF. So the economic situation is somewhat difficult. He promised that he would renegotiate all the contract, notably on gas and oil. So there have been a moment of, let's say, incertitude for the business establishment in Senegal and abroad. The investor didn't come. So the 2 years have been economically difficult. And you can see the rationality of the president firing him, because the mandate was not going anywhere. But also you have a lot of people saying that the president shouldn't fire the prime minister, even though he had the power, because his presidency is it's the prime minister who handled him in the presidency. So this is the situation.
I wonder if I can both add something and pose a question. What I would like to add, I think it's important for your listeners to know that Senegal is a democratic society. There are lots of conflicts, but political parties, incumbent presidents have been defeated many times. 3 times, 4 times, I'm not sure. I lost count. And furthermore, the presidents came from different ethnic groups. And I may add, when I made the comment that presidents had come from 4 ethnic groups. One of my Senegalese friends says, 4, where do you get 4? And I said, well, Macky Sall is Tukulur. And my friend said, but he grew up in Fatick, which is a Serer town. And that's Senegal. There's people intermarry between the major ethnic groups, and and uh, and elections are held on issues, and the fight between Diomaye and Sonko is a fight over issues, and there is conflict, and as there is in all societies, but this is only one of my friends has ever been jailed, and this is Abdoulaye Bacheli, and he ended up being president of the National Assembly. None of my friends has ever been killed by has ever been jailed illegally. Senegal is illegal. The only society in Africa, I think, that is comparable would be Ghana, maybe Zambia, though Zambia has been having problems in recent days. It's important to understand this about Senegal, that there are a lot of fights, but they are held according to the law, and and elections are basically democratic. Would you agree, Hadi?
I would agree. I think one of the problem we have is that we have a very irresponsible rhetoric in
Yeah.
politics. For example, every politician will say that the man in charge, currently in charge, is a dictator. So we said that Abdoulaye Wade was a dictator. We said that Macky Sall was a dictator, and we said that Sonko or Diomaye are dictators, depending on who is in charge. And
Of
that,
two dictators,
yeah,
or 2 dictators at the same time.
yeah. So and it's very sad actually, because given that you have everyone saying that everyone is a dictator, you don't have the rational discussion you should have had. For example, if you take the case of Sonko, when he got accused of rape, I was actually on the side of Sonko in 2019, and I wanted him to win. But when he got accused of rape, what I said was that if he got accused of rape, he just need to go and respond to justice, and someone else will take his place. He has no place in the public sphere now. And everyone was telling me that no, Macky Sall is a dictator. So Sonko's accusation, the accusations against Sonko have no merit and cannot have merit. And anyway, we shouldn't talk about it, because if we let it succeed, Macky Sall will still be president, because he would cheat on the elections and all this stuff. Even though I think everyone now should agree that you can't cheat on elections in Senegal. So that to me is
Why? Because it's so democratic that you get caught if you tried to cheat on elections, or that's a remarkable statement. You can't cheat on elections in Senegal because the United States, they're certainly
yeah.
arguing that you can
It's,
cheat
it's
in the U.S.
I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, myself in 2012, I was telling my brother that, oh, what will cheat on the election? And he was telling me it's not possible. And I didn't believe it. And what he told me and what I saw afterwards, in 2012, I was living in France. Then I came back. The problem with elections in Senegal is that elections are organized at the local level, and with civil servants who preside the voting, the schools where we vote. So after the votings, the votes are counted, and when they are counted, they are proclaimed, and they are counted before everyone, before people in the neighborhood, but also before representative of the political parties. So at the very lower level, you have a count, and the count go back to the prefecture. At the prefecture, everyone brings the votes, and then they calculate it. And once they calculate it, there is a judge who validates, who is there, who attends, and who validates the calculation. Once he validates the calculation, it is transmitted to the I don't know whether it's the Supreme Court or the Conseil Constitutionnel, one of them. I think it's the Conseil Constitutionnel, but I'm not sure. But one of the jurisdictions is receive all the procès-verbaux. Uh, So it's pure calculation, which means that whenever we have an election, everyone actually and the parties do that. By the night, everyone knows who has won, who have won. And so with this structuration, it's very difficult to cheat, because if you have you say that there is this voting booth that has this result, and they will ask you who was there, because we vote in schools and everyone go to the school and everyone knows the schools in the neighborhood. So we
Yeah,
know exactly who voted and where he voted. Subha.
yeah, I just want to add a few things to what you're saying, Hady. One is that uh, so much of Senegalese society is this kind of accountability on the local level, which is something that we see less and less of, I think, in our so called Western societies, especially with the computerization of our voting polling stations, so that there's less and less um, transparency at the lower levels. And so I think that's one of the things that's really remarkable, and perhaps at the base of what you're saying, which is that, if you're going to cheat, you're going to have to cheat with your brother, or your neighbor right there, right? Somebody who actually knows and who was there. I also want to say, another thing about what's going on right now is that 76% of the population of Senegal is under the age of 35, which
Mm.
I think is very hard for us to even imagine and understand what that means in terms of political affiliations. And a lot of what Sonko was able to do was really garner the support for a revolutionary position vis-a-vis French presence in Senegal and European multinational presence in Senegal. So a lot of his support was youth saying, enough is enough. We want our country back. And we haven't had our country back ever, right? Because every president has succumbed to the multinational and the French presence and economic um, control. So Sonko represented that. Now, at the same time, uh, it was only, I believe, in 2024 that rape was made a crime in Senegal. And that's because the judiciary made it a crime. And then suddenly things changed. Like parents were going to police stations and acknowledging that their child had been raped or their daughter had been raped. Things that, it used to be a thing of great shame, and no one, it would just affect families and women's lives, but no one would talk about it, or young people's lives. I mean, so many people can get raped regardless of their gender. And so suddenly there was this awareness that came alongside this criminalization of rape. And then shortly afterwards, women came up and said, that Sonko had raped them. So that became a great issue of contention, because immediately those who supported him, and including Sonko, said, "Well, this is all made up. Yesterday this wasn't a crime. Today it's a crime, and now it's going to cost me this election." So he went to jail. He went to jail for his crime. And speaking of polygamy, he married again while he was in jail, right? So he kind of, what he did uh, was just really, really remarkable and disturbing on many, many levels. He came back hoping he would just have, as Hady said, continued control over his former ally, who now was the president. And he was only the president because Sonko couldn't become president because Sonko was in jail. So it was just this really shuffling of positions. And I think Sonko just believed that he would still be the de facto president. I think something changed in the last 2 years, between 2024 and 2026, when Jamai Fai, who was, probably the youngest president, right? Hady,
He's very young. He's 19. He's born in 1980, I think.
right.
So
So what, so young, this very young president, no one really expected him to take any kind of political stance outside of his relationship with Sonko. And my experience this time going to Senegal was really noting the polarization along economic lines and class lines. So a certain class of my friends who are now profoundly like their businesses are impacted, who are feeling kind of the danger of Sonko and his kind of revolutionary stance are very much kind of standing with Jamai Fai. Whereas others, the younger people who have always been on the side of Sonko, are convinced, that all these rape allegations are false. They say they're only allegations, and that Sonko is the real revolutionary leader that they need. And people are really polarized. And I think one of the reasons I wanted Hady to speak is because I feel like you're kind of able to kind of cut through that polarization and talk perhaps more um, carefully around this topic. But it seems to me, some people they compare Sonko to Donald Trump, right? That he's this populist.
some people do it positively, actually. So
Yes, yes.
one of Sonko's affiliates was very, he took it as a praise. He said that Sonko is a Donald Trump of Senegal.
Mm.
And he said, like, just like Donald Trump is making America great again, Sonko will make Senegal great again.
Right.
And he took it like it's the Captain Touré. He took it positively. And some people like me, for example, would say that Sonko is really the Donald Trump of Senegal, in the sense that he's really ignorant of the dynamics of the world, and he has a very simplistic view of the economy, of the economic system, because you can everyone, we all talk about France Afrique, for example, about the problems of fishing, for example, the fact that you have big Chinese and European boats fishing in Senegal, and fishing was an important part of Senegalese economy, of Senegalese alimentation, and so it is just important for us. Fishing is important for us, and we have all these big boats and all these agreements with Europe. So everyone is asking that to stop. But if you talk to it's 2 weeks ago, I was talking to someone who is a professional on fishing, on the industry, and he was telling me, yeah, but you don't know that 80% of the fishing by the traditional fishermen is done for exportation. So if you stop the agreements with the European Union and with the Chinese, if you do it brutally, these people won't have no one to sell their fish to, because the fish they now they now produce is not the one we want here, and it's not and people do not have the means to buy these fish. So the situation economically is complex. Sonko has a discourse which is very simple. Uh, if you France plus corruption, that's the only problems Senegal has.
May I ask, first of all, about the fishing? What are the cleavages about fishing that Sanko in favor of a fishing ban or limiting it to fish that are not preventing overfishing. That I think everybody would say that is key. Is what position do these politicians take on that? But also, I'm fascinated by the changing norms about rape and the ambiguity about the positions both in the U.S. and in probably the rest of the world, and certainly from what you're saying in Africa, because the Me Too movement a few years ago was one in really attempting to make rape a far more serious, or even touching, sexually related touching, a more serious infraction of social norms. I don't know. I mean, it looked like they were getting there. That women who protested against being sexually harassed or um, certainly raped were winning the fight, but not when it came to Donald Trump, because it seems that Donald Trump can do anything he pleases sexually, and nothing happens to him politically. Now, is that comparable to what you're saying is happening in Senegal, that the stronger norms prohibiting rape simply are not having the political impact that they should, or am I misunderstanding you?
Can I introduce a little bit of history here? Um, the first National Assembly after independence consisted of 80 men, no women, 80 men. And Senghor, the rather brilliant poet president, uh, uh, was convinced that partly because Tunisia had a female member of the National Assembly. I don't know if it had more than one, but it had a female. He insisted in the 1963 election that there be at least one female on his party's list. And the woman that was chosen was a woman named Carolyn Fay, who was, correct me if I get anything wrong, Hady, who was the wife of a politician in his party. And she, in many ways, became the chief of the women. So if there was a women's conference in China, she chose the delegation. Senegal has so much changed. I was, I mean, my my friends had wives who were professionally active. Some of them were in the civil service. Some of them were uh, 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 they were active in different ways. So Senegal went from a position where women had a very, very limited role in public life to a position where women were active. There are female judges. There are female ministers. Am I right about this?
Actually, we've had since around 2012. I don't know the year, but it's after 2012, after 2010. I think around 2010 or just before, we've had a law on parity, and the law says that in any election, in any elective list, there should be as much men as women. And if the head of the list is a man, the second should be a woman. If the third would be a man, the fourth a woman, etc., etc. And this, for example, uh, made that our National Assembly now is around 40 or 50% women, around 40, 45 or 47% women. I don't have the numbers, but it's around 47% women. So,
And
so women,
that is a radical change from the situation that existed at independence.
yeah,
At
of course,
the time, most there were a lot of midwives, but there weren't many lawyers or
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
go to the university. I mean, if I don't travel much anymore, but until very recently, I attended conferences and whatnot, and the students included large numbers of women. Many of the teachers in Senegal are women, uh, but what I think this means in terms of rape is that there are women expressing women's points of view. Uh, Would you?
Yes, yes. You have for example, the law against the law criminalizing rape is 2020 actually, and the accusations of rape against Sonko is 2021, and but it's an ambiguous progress because now rape is a crime, but when you got accused of rape, most of the time the judges won't condemn you for rape.
Yeah,
They will condemn you for sexual assault, or they will find a way to requalify the facts so that you don't take the 10 years. Because if you take the crime qualification, it's automatically at least 10 years of jail. So and that has been one of the problem because Sonko has not been condemned for rape. He's been condemned for détournement de jeunesse. I don't know how to say it in English. But
corruption of the youth.
Yes.
corruption of the youth, yeah.
Yeah.
So you have now his supporters saying that he's not been condemned for rape.
Okay. Could I ask a question here?
Yeah.
Actually, two questions. Where does Diomaye get his support from? I mean, he's challenging Sonko.
Yeah.
Does he have supporters? And are there issues dividing them?
Actually, when I told the story, I told it in a manner that was as generous as possible for Sonko. Another way to tell the story is that Jomai is one of the founding fathers of PASTEF. There are those who created PASTEF. Sonko was not one of them. They created the party.
Is that a political party, Pasha?
Yeah, it is a political party of Sonko's that is identified with Sonko. But actually, it's a group of friends who created that party and then decided to ask Sonko to come and lead the party because he was a unionist and he had already face recognition. So the argument of Jomai's camp is to say that Jomai has been the driving force of the organization of the actual organization of the party. He's selected everyone in the party. He's installed everyone in leadership position. He's been really the main driving force under the day-to-day functioning of the party, and Sonko was only the face. That's one thing. Second, actually, Sonko didn't really choose Jomai to be his candidate. Sonko had two other candidates, and Jomai decided to be a candidate and to ask for the parrainage. When he got the parrainage, when Sonko went out of jail, he campaigned with Jomai. And the narrative was that Sonko is the godfather of Jomai. But historically, if you look at what happened really, Jomai wasn't really his candidate. So that means that it's not. I mean, we all saw Jomai as being under the leadership of Sonko, but it doesn't mean that Jomai has no legitimacy at all. And he's managing to have people join him actually from Pastef, the main party. He created his party, and you have people from Pastef who joined him. You have a lot of people who hate Sonko because Sonko is a polarizing figure. And these people also, some of them decided to join Jomai because they consider that of the two, Jomai is the only one who can save the republic, because Sonko is such a divisive figure, but also such a megalomaniac that
Excuse me, but that's such a strong statement. The only person who can save the republic. Uh, I haven't heard anything else in this discussion so far that's given me the impression that your republic was really vulnerable to what overthrow the government,
no,
a fraction of fractionation and polarization and dissolution of the political will to support the government. What if you believe that that is possibly true, that only one person can save the republic, tell me what the bad outcome might be, in your opinion.
everyone in Senegal is saying that he's the guy he support is the only one who can save the republic. But there is a real problem also. For example, from 2021 to 2024, Sonko effectively called for the army to take power, take power. The army didn't do it, but he did ask for that. He had very outrageous uh, 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 meetings in which he attacked Macky Sall. And he said, for example, I don't know whether you remember Samuel Doe, who got killed by the rebel in Libya. Yeah, he got publicly killed. He said that if Macky Sall didn't stop attacking him, he would end up like Samuel Doe. So you have these.
We're now, I mean, we've come
And
to the end of our time,
yeah,
but it's
but
the plot
let me
has,
just
because
finish.
you've thrown in a heavier
Yeah,
storyline than I was expecting.
yeah.
But I don't know. Let's just say that we have to end this. Give me your opinion. Would you agree that either that the republic depends on the election of either one of these people?
No, I think Senegal is a strong democracy. I think we have institutions. For example, the army in Senegal is an institution. The judges, the judiciary is an institution. The university in Senegal is an institution. We have one of the strongest law for freedom of expression of the university in the world. For example, for example, no, for example, when I was I was head of the union, and during COVID, the president of Senegal at the time, Macky Sall, he said that he said, let's close the universities. He said we close the schools and the universities. As head of the union, I wrote a public rebuke of the president, saying that the president of Senegal has no authority to close the universities. We agree with him that the university should be closed, but it's not he has no power to close the universities. And after that, he never ever said that he would do X or Y at the universities. He always would say, okay, let's open the school, and the Minister of Higher Ed will see with the president of universities whether to open or not. That was the official language of the state after the rebuke.
I was getting worried a few minutes ago, but we do have to close now. This is our time is up, and I'm now optimistic that your your perception of Senegal as a democracy is something I can count on. And that I want to thank you all. This has been so interesting, and I've learned a lot, and I expect our friends viewing this will do as well. Thank you
Thank
again,
you.
and hope to see you again one time soon. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Bye.